Hey everybody, it's Jamie from Lemon Rebellion. I'm here with Julia Seal. We're going to be doing a live Q&A today about taking your questions about how to make it through the holidays and use this as an opportunity to really help us propel our relationships forward. So it's always good to see you, Julia. How are you?
I'm really good and coping with this wild wind on this side of the world at the moment.
Oh my, it sounds exciting.
Crazy.
Awesome. Well, most people have probably already heard about you from Lemon Rebellion and our summit and other things we've been doing together, but it'd be good for you to just, give us a little introduction to who you are, and then we can start talking about this topic.
Yeah, so I'm here in Cape Town in South Africa, and really my passion is about whole being happiness for women in midlife. So just how do we approach our midlives from a completely different way of looking at it through a lens of whole being happiness. And so today we're talking about one of those aspects of whole being, right? We're talking about relationships. Um, because that's rather core actually to happiness, surprisingly essential to our happiness. And we've gone through a strange time these last almost 2 years with COVID and the pandemic. And there's been so much going on since then that I think our social connections, even our work relationships, our love relationships, everything looks different and feels different for us. And now we have the holidays arriving. In the States, it's Thanksgiving this weekend.
It is, and everyone's getting back together face to face, or a lot of people are. Supposedly, the statistics say that this holiday in the U.S., we're almost back up to pre-pandemic levels of travel. So that means crazy airports, lots of road travel, people getting back together face to face. And what do you think has changed with all these things that have gone on that people might be feeling or confronting when we're back together with our families in a way that maybe feels a lot different than it did before?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that's coming up, and it's come up through the whole pandemic, is dealing with anxiety around how am I with people. So, what is my stance around vaccines and masks and social distancing and other people's, and how that, is there a clash? How does that work? I'm just thinking about in the US elections last year and all of that, the political situation between families and what that brought up. So it's
Right.
definitely anxiety, but there's also this anxiety around just being in social spaces. So that's also new. We've kind of been isolated from each other a lot, and we've got really used to doing, communicating online, and we're not really sure what it's going to be like. And I think a lot of people are so excited to be back with families. So I
Yeah.
think expectations are right up here. But then there's also all of this kind of, you know, what if Uncle so and so doesn't wear his mask and who's going to say something? And so what was usual family drama is escalated, right? We've got all the things that have happened in the world, the politics that has been going on, massive economic change, and now all of this COVID. So I think the anxieties plus the expectations just escalating concern for people. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, because it is exciting to think about, oh my gosh, I can see, this family member again. And I think in the US, people are connecting and seeing each other in person maybe more than where you and I live. I'm in Ecuador, and as you said, you're in South Africa. So we're a bit in different conditions. But I think that juxtaposition of being so excited, but also some of those, I don't know if you'd call them old wounds, but those old sensitivities are still maybe there with certain individuals. And then we have this extra level of complications of, where do people stand on social distancing and masking up? And even recently, it came to my attention in a group I'm in on nutrition for vegetarians and vegans. And I'm neither, but I do eat a mostly plant based diet. People that have these dietary considerations can feel also really excluded when their family doesn't take into account what they eat. So they show up at a family meal and don't have really anything to choose from. So all of these old sensitivities come back out, and they're in the forefront again because suddenly we thought, oh, these things didn't go away. They're still here, but how am I different, or how can I show up differently in the midst of those things? What would you recommend or ask someone to think about that's going back into a situation where it's like, okay, there are some old things that might, I might have to face this time. How can we face those things being less triggered, less offended, more open-hearted, and showing up in a way that's
Yeah,
better?
that's kind of interesting, because to sort of say, how can I be less triggered, doesn't even speak to what trigger is, right? Because trigger comes, we go in with the best of intentions, right? And then something happens, and that's exactly what a trigger is, because it's opening up an old patterning from way back when. So I think what we really have to look at now, like before even going into this, is like, what's the relationship with yourself like? How strong are you inside? What is your resilience? And we know, and I mean, all coaches are sitting in this situation of working with people's resilience over these last 2 years. So we're sitting kind of the end of the year exhaustion with a lot of people who are not actually feeling as resilient as they might in a normal situation. And even in a normal situation, they're going to get triggered. So one of my suggestions right up front is to have a little chat with yourself about your level of resilience, and how are you going to hold that, like almost like that inner anchor. How are you going to hold that through this time? And to find some little trick or tool that's going to bring you back into that grounded, centered, resilient space. Because you're going to need that more than anything else. And so, the one thing we know about relationships is, apart from their massive, massive impact on our happiness, right? They are the single biggest contributor to our happiness, relationships. But the other thing is, if we get into trouble with relationships, it generally tells us there's something in trouble in our relationship with ourselves first. Something to do with where do we get our power from? Where do we get our inner strength from? How do we build resilience that a coach like me would want to work with first? Because if you're resilient and if you're solid, actually doesn't matter what goes on out there.
That's a very interesting point. A very good point. Would you want to share a tip where people might want to start thinking about that?
Yeah, so my all-time favorites, and first of all, I would encourage anybody, if you've got anything that you use right now to tap in and to be grounded, and whether it's your cup of coffee in the morning or whether it's your journal, make sure it goes with you, right? Because you're going to need all of these at your fingertips. But the one that I think my most favorite, and it's one of my coaching tools, but it's nothing unique, is, and I call it 3 long, strong breaths. As simple as breath, right? So you can build, because what you're trying to do is just connect to what's going on inside yourself. If you're feeling anxious, you've been triggered slightly, or you are angry, is go inside and breathe, because it changes everything. I mean, we're talking at a biochemical level, right? Not just up here. So there's lots going on when you breathe here, right? Because, 3 long, strong breaths is like a mini meditation. But then there's all the stuff going on in your body, right? That's basically bringing up the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and relaxation state. So what you're trying to do by breathing and paying attention to your breathing is you take the focus away from out there into yourself. And then the 3 long, strong, deep breaths activates the right brain waves in your brain, right? Activates your vagus nerve and activates the right chemicals waking up in your brain and your body. So that's kind of almost my first tip whenever you go into something that's tricky, even flying on an airplane, right?
Yeah, especially if you haven't done it in a while, that can feel more stressful than it would need to be.
And it is literally just like, And you do that for three times,
Mm-hmm.
and suddenly you'll see. And so that for me is how you catch yourself in that little instant between the event that's happening and your reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the magic is. And I play a lot in that space in coaching, because we try and extend that in coaching, because often, right, we're triggered, we react. So what we're trying to do is to slow the reaction down and to bring ourselves right into our own bodies, get what's going on out there, and then you're suddenly able to respond in a completely different way.
Powerful tool. I love how,
Breathing with you, it's kind of easy.
yeah, I love how, I mean, I think we always as humans want to construct these stories about how complex it is to make change and do things differently, and we have to understand it all before anything could possibly shift in any kind of fundamental way. But my life has also shown me what I've learned through being close to people like you, Julia, and to you. This amazing coaching circle we have through Lemon Rebellion is oftentimes these very simple tools, but we may know them, but when we don't do them or have them in a consistent way in our lives as almost a different kind of trigger, a positive trigger of this happens and okay, I'm going to react. We aren't really getting all the benefits of the power of these really simple tools to just be present and be intentional in our reactions. So thank you for reminding us of that tool. Do you have any other great ones you want to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you're about to go into like your family group, right, or come Christmas or Thanksgiving this weekend, you want to do it purposefully and mindfully. Okay, that's a word that maybe we're overusing at the moment, but purposefully and intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
So you decide now, almost like today, ahead of time, how do you want to be in this situation? So not how you want other people to act, or that it must be a peaceful situation and there's no drama. It's how do you want to show up inside yourself, with yourself, because that then reflects on the outside. So if you say, I want to feel calm, or I want to feel at peace, or I want to have a great time, I want to laugh, I want to feel love.
Mm-hmm.
So to set that intention. And we make the mistake, right? We think about it and we go, oh yeah, like that would be so nice. But we don't do it purposefully. So when you set an intention like that, my best advice is to keep it kind of as alive as you possibly can all the way through the day. I mean, I love the idea of setting yourself reminders on your phone, or even that it shows up on your lock screen, like you make a little graphic or something with the words of your intention, so that every time you look at your phone, it shows up. Mm-hmm. Another tip, which kind of a bit weird, but it's quite really useful, is to take advantage of the bathroom moment, right? It's your moment, because we have to go to the bathroom several times during the day. It is the moment to come back, to remember your intention of what is this event about for you, and to do some breathing, And then if you can remember, but lots of us forget, is like as you're going to bed at night, brushing your teeth, just to reflect on how much was my intention alive today. And you can see from both of my examples, and really this is coaching, okay, there always is an aha moment, or you read an article and you think this is such a cool idea, right? But most of the ideas we have actually all heard a million times, but it's how do we keep it alive so it is actually fully integrated into who we are. So it's showing up over and over again in our life every day, like you say, the tiny little things, but that we're constantly going back to it. So are we intentionally breathing? Are we intentionally visiting the state that we want to create for ourselves 7, 8, 20, 100 times in the day?
Yeah, that's awesome. You're reminding me of, and I may get the term wrong, but in a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear, he gives all these strategies. You've read it too. He gives all these really interesting strategies for how do we then apply those great ideas into our behavior and our routines. And I think the term I'm looking for here is habit stacking, but it might be
Stacking,
habit.
yeah.
Yeah, there's
Habit
one.
stacking.
Habit stacking. So, for instance, I guess going to the bathroom isn't a habit per se, more than just something that we do. But you can anchor to, all right. Every time I go to the bathroom, I recite three things I'm grateful for, or like you say, I reflect on, am I thinking of my intention, or I just think of my intention in that moment, and that's when I do it throughout the day. Then maybe you have the reminders on the phone to remind you to do it when you're actually in the bathroom. But I love this idea of habit stacking. You could do it like you said with when you brush your teeth. Maybe while you're brushing your teeth, you're reflecting on that intention. And if you have great dental hygiene, that's something that's happening 2 or 3 times a day for you. So I wanted to mention that tool because knowing that term around it might be an interesting way to help people think about what are you already doing in your life that is a consistent habit, and then how can you tie in this new kind of awareness about what your intentions around relationships in the upcoming holidays. Think about, Thanksgiving if that's a holiday you celebrate, it's coming up. What is something that you already know that's going to happen during that holiday that you could anchor to and attach your new intention to so that you are reminded and living in that kind of desire for what you want to create during the holiday. And if you don't celebrate Thanksgiving, we've got December full of all sorts of holidays and the new year.
And
Yeah,
end of year
so
and parties and all kinds of
right.
things.
So this suggestion I think works for any of those situations where you know it's going to be a little bit more charged, maybe a little bit more high stress. You don't have the same resilience level, base level maybe than we've had in years past. So how can we use this idea of holding on to that intention and stacking it into other habits that we have? I like that.
Yeah, and then that is actually an excellent book. It's got loads of ideas on habits and starting small. Yeah, and the habit stacking is great. I mean, I know one that I use a lot. I was as advised many years ago, and I might have spoken about this before, is with how to start a meditation habit.
Oh,
And the Buddhist master I was talking to said the best way to do it is as you get out of bed in the morning, you just roll onto your meditation mat.
roll, literally, physically roll onto it.
You don't even think about it. You're just rolling onto the mat and it suddenly it happens. And then, and then very slowly then you're building those pathways in the brain, right? And once those pathways start to be carved in the brain, then it all just gets easier.
Exactly. Well, another thing about that book that I like is just how it draws our attention to the cues that we have. A visual cue, an audio cue, whatever those cues are. I mean, social media, for instance, is fantastic at doing this, and our smartphones of sending us notifications. The little thing will go away until you pay attention to it. So, um, what we
But
can
use it for you, use it for you. Because typically we get the
exactly.
notifications that are like externally driven, but you can create your own for you,
Yes.
right?
Uh-huh. And I like that about what you're saying, having the mat for meditation next to your bed. It's almost a cue of all you do is roll out and you can't do anything but see it. So you know and you're conscious exactly of, am I going to follow through with this intention of meditating or whatever the behavior may be? Or am I going to step over it and move on with the rest of my day? And that makes that very obvious what you've kind of chosen to do so you can decide how you want to deal with it, which is interesting.
And there is a huge opportunity this holiday time um, to almost play with yourself, right? To watch yourself in these situations. And, so you try to set an intention or you decide you're going to breathe, or one of the other tips that we will share later on. You decide to pick one of these. And I suggest really only pick one
Mhm.
or two. Don't try and do everything. But the trick is to watch yourself forget, watch yourself remember, so it's that's ability to start almost like the observer of yourself. That's kind of where the fun comes in, where you can take that step aside and start watching what's going on around you, whether it's the game of the family or the game of the party and the game of yourself in the situation. And one of my teachers talks about MeSearch. Now, he's a Harvard professor, so he's big into research, but he's
Yes.
into MeSearch when it comes to happiness, because it really is about what works for me and getting to know yourself incredibly well. So if you know yourself in relationships, or you know yourself in conflict in the family, what are your dominant patterns? Watch yourself go down them. And perhaps even this first holiday period, don't necessarily even expect yourself to be different. Just notice what you do. Notice who triggers you. Notice what you were thinking when you were triggered, or what you were feeling when you were triggered. And kind of that huge self-compassion. Like, you can't change who you are in an instant. But you can, when you start doing MeSearch, we can work with that, right? That's the exciting stuff.
I love that. MeSearch, and then also gamifying, you've said. Look at it as a game.
Yeah.
Tell us more about what would that look like very practically in this holiday season for people that are going back, meeting in these big family meetings, or maybe they're not even big, maybe they're just, going into their family kind of routines. How can we use that gaming kind of attitude to
Well, think of it like, it's the board of life, right? The game board of life. And they're all players, including us. Right. And what's fascinating is if you go in and you sit there and you watch that as if it's happening, you're going to know that your brother does this when your mother says that. And you're going to know that you're going to get really mad when Uncle so-and-so starts on the political story. And you're going to react like this, and you're going to storm out the room, and then everyone's going to be embarrassed and no one's going to know what to say. So you almost, especially families, right? And teams. Same thing happens in work teams. You know what's going to play out. So it's almost like this thing about your expectations. And everyone has these high expectations that everything's going to be different. I would say be excited to see how much it's going to be the same as it's always been. But you're watching it this time, right? And you're trying to gather data and look at what's going on and watch yourself in the situation. So, and it is as simple as that. If you catch yourself reacting to Uncle so-and-so, and you can feel this fury's rain up inside you, and you storm out and you go sit in the bathroom for 5 minutes and you go, there I was doing that again. There I go again. Or there mum goes again. And it's done with love and compassion, right? Because we are who we are, and we have these brains that are wired, and they're wired to fire in a certain way, and they'll keep doing it unless we start putting a little bit of space in there to try and change the way those pathways look.
Yeah.
They don't change overnight, and your whole family's not getting coaching.
Yeah, wouldn't that be interesting if our whole family did though at the same time? That would be so cool. Well, you've brought up something here that I'm not sure I'm going to phrase it clearly the first time around. I'll do my best, but you said something there about observing and using self-compassion. So like, oh, look how I reacted there, and you kind of laugh at it and say, okay, I'm seeing myself. How does that play against the dynamic that so often happens of a person wanting, and I say person, I'm one as well. This is something all of us do at one point or another, of feeling like I'm justified in being furious that this person didn't respect my boundary, whether it's around the food or the masks or not talking about a certain topic, or there could be things from the past that are unsaid that need to remain unsaid in a big public context or something, or it will cause a huge fight. Like how does one both embody that self-compassion and game kind of playful attitude of let me observe and watch and learn, while also maybe feeling like if I don't stand up for myself here, I'm going to be trampled, I'm going to be walked on, or it's not right. And so we entrench ourselves in positions that maybe open the door for conflict if others are also entrenching themselves in those positions. I don't know if I explained that very well, but what do you think?
No, that's fine. We can try. We can go from there. So
Yeah.
I think Often, so when you're looking at it, when you're kind of looking at the family or the group as, and it's the game, right? And it's on the game board. That kind of has you've got a thought going on in your brain there about, oh, I'm watching this, I'm observing this is a game. And so you've got, like, your feelings are more neutral. Okay, so this is it's almost like a meditation in itself. So let's just explain what goes on in meditation. The idea of meditation, or the spirit behind it, right, is to sit in a position of neutrality to whatever thought comes through your mind. So if you think of, and there's been studies done, they reckon that we have 70,000 thoughts going through our brain during a day, right? So we're clearly not thinking every single thought. There's thoughts going past that we are not thinking. So there's a difference between thought and thinking. So think of it like thoughts like clouds going across your mind. Mm-hmm. And you pick one of those thoughts and you pull it down and you engage in the process of thinking. And then you're hooked, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have feelings, and then you have actions following on from that. That's what happens. If you're looking at the family as a game and you're watching what's going on, and something happens and you get a rush of emotions, you have hooked onto a particular thought and got involved, really. I suppose that's right. So you've gone from a position of neutrality to getting involved. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying we don't get involved, right? We're social beings, and getting involved is, like, sometimes it's about social change even. Sometimes it's just about a lovely conversation. Sometimes it's about a robust conversation. But what you want to do is get involved, pick the thought, right? Get involved intentionally, not reactively. Because a reaction is an automatic behavior from way back when we were unskilled, when we were children, before we got any kind of relationship learning. And, that's another point about, we actually never learn how to be in relationship. That's why they're such a source of suffering for us. But, back to this idea of the minute you notice yourself flare up, that you've hooked in, and that's fine. You might want to. Mm-hmm. And it is an interesting thing, and boundaries is a big topic, big different topic, but you want to watch what your thoughts are in that moment when you're feeling very justified, for example, because this is where we all go wrong in relationships, all of us, is we are actually, and I include myself in this, almost like still little kids, like little toddlers who have tantrums because the world is not conforming to the way I think it should be. So-and-so is doing something that I think that he shouldn't. Even if so-and-so says something and he shouldn't because it's upsetting mum, or so-and-so shouldn't say this political view or this vaccination view because it's going to upset someone else or it's going to ruin the dinner or whatever. And the best learning ever in the relationship world is everybody gets to be themselves. And we have to make peace with that, because we get to be ourselves. The minute someone starts to control us, we know what that feels like, right? So none of us accept being controlled. And we get into so much trouble when we think he should, she should, they should have thought about my food, right? He shouldn't be saying that. Actually, he can say whatever he wants. He's an adult, right? There's no agreed set of laws. I mean, in a democracy, right, which we're all in, well, most of us are in, but there's a set of laws, right, that we actually have signed up for without even realizing, right? So we don't all just do exactly what we want to do when we drive. Right. Yeah. Okay, in some countries the driving is a bit more wild than in other countries, but there are rules of the road, and to get together and be together, we all follow these rules, but they are just like an accepted set of rules. And a family will have an accepted set of rules, which is quite useful to challenge, actually, because they are unspoken about who should say this and how this should be, just to either keep the peace or to keep one or two people happy. And it's quite something to blow that wide open, but you can blow it wide open for yourself. When you start to realize how much you're shoulding all over everybody else is actually about trying to control other people so that you feel better.
Interesting.
And so what we do in coaching is look at sovereignty, right? Emotional sovereignty, emotional power, and emotional adulthood, which is you are fully responsible and own your feelings. No one else makes us feel anything. They can't, not possible. In the wiring that we actually have in our bodies, Uncle Fred doesn't make me feel angry. And this is a really tough one to grasp, and we work hard on this in coaching, right? Because the minute you get that and you own your emotional life, you are free. And that's the thing about, we try and control other people so that we can feel better, versus I own my emotions. I'm a sovereign being. And you get to do whatever you want, people out there. You get to go play on the game board. And I get to decide what I'm going to do about it. And you will have boundaries, right? We have unwritten boundaries sometimes, and we have written boundaries. So a marriage agreement, depending on what culture you're married into or what religion you married into, is I have an agreement with my husband is we don't do sex with other people outside, right, of our marriage. That's a boundary. So we have a written boundary that says if you do that, this is broken. Or another one that people will have, and actually I must say this in terms of violence, like violence in the home, right? So if you are someone who's listening and you are experiencing violence, there are places to go. Lifeline, I think, exists all over the world. And that coaching is not the place for dealing with violence, right? So we just need to make sure that we're physically safe before we enter coaching, because that's physical safety. But for many people, physical violence by a spouse, husband or wife, means I leave. You hit me, I walk out the door. Those are boundaries around physical safety. And we get to write them. But very often, this is a mistake we make in this whole controlling thing, is we set boundaries trying to control other people, when actually if we were just fully in ownership of our emotions, we wouldn't need 90% of those boundaries. I don't know if you've ever met a very boundaried person, what it's like.
Yes, I have, actually.
Prickly.
They're prickly, but what I like about it, and I'd love to hear some thoughts, your thoughts on this. Some people may think, and it can feel like this if you come up against a very boundaried person, that is them trying to control the others. When really the spirit of it, if it's coming from a good place, it's not to manipulate or control others. It's just to say, this is where I kind of put my limit. So for instance, I have a very close friend that could care less about how urgent your text messages are to get the response. Because he has his day organized and his priorities organized in such a way that he attends to that during a certain period of time. And if it comes over the weekend, also he could care less. And it's because he's protecting his mental health and his anxiety levels that go up and down a lot when he is bombarded with what mostly are, text messages or other people's requirements of us. They're not our requirements or our values out into the world. So at first that felt awful, but then when you understand, or when I began to understand the heart behind it, I could respect it more. So I think it's interesting. I'll share that with you. That's the one example I have, that it doesn't feel great sometimes to come up against another person's boundaries, but at least in this case, it didn't feel like a control issue towards others, but a protection of oneself to be aligned within a certain value that this person in particular was trying to live.
Yeah, and I think that's, I mean, in the right spirit, right? Is a boundary is all about what I will do. So they don't even need to be spoken. You know, because a lot of the time, if you say, well, if you do this, then I'm going to do that, it sounds like some kind of ultimatum, right? So the way for, you know, for boundaries, for example, if you like in a holiday situation, you know, it's like, okay, no one must talk about COVID because it's just too fraught, or no one must talk about the political situation because we're on two opposing sides, or no one must talk about Brexit, right? Because it's just too much for people. It kind of ruins the chance of what social connection's all about, and how do we expand our views on the world if we can't listen to opposing views. But if you are in a place where your resilience is not strong, and where you're struggling with that emotional sovereignty, then you could set a boundary inside you, right? Is the minute Uncle Fred starts ranting about that topic and I see my mum burst into tears, I will just walk out and drink some water and breathe 3 times. You don't have to tell Uncle Fred that, like, well, if you're going to bring that topic up, I'm just going to leave. Because you're trying to control him, right? He's so, like your friend, for example, he created some boundaries for himself, and they're just out there, right?
Julie, it's we're getting a little bit of the connection seems to be a little bit unstable.
Just on the weekend. Oh, okay. Have I lost you?
Yeah, the past 60 seconds.
Oh, right. So I've been waffling all to myself.
Not too much, but we've had great luck actually with having the connection be so good the whole past 40 minutes. So where it cut off for me, you were talking about if it's not your responsibility to go back and tell this uncle that's made your mother cry what a jerk he is, kind of thing, and then it cut off from there.
Yeah. And so I think boundaries are a big piece of work in coaching relationships. But, what I'm encouraging people to do today is to not set too many boundaries unless you really have to. So when I was talking about physical boundaries, right, for your own safety, that's
Right.
one thing.
Right.
Right. But so that you don't make me feel like this, and I don't feel upset, and mum doesn't feel worried, and don't do those boundaries. They actually aren't helpful. And the world's not telling us that, right? We're not hearing that message in, all kinds of different types of therapies we're hearing about, are your boundaries strong? But it's very much a kind of parent-child dynamic, a boundary, right? I'm setting the boundary and you have to obey. Otherwise, I'm going to do that. And it's like we need to move from that. We are all sovereign individuals. And the more we can be amongst people who are so different from us and who have really unpleasant views, the more we can open up to have the kind of conversations we need to be having in this world. The more we can learn to understand each other better, which means probably going forward into a better situation the next time. If someone feels heard, listened to, you can express yourself, they can express themselves, and suddenly there's a different place of understanding.
Oh gosh, how important that is.
Where relationships start to shift,
Yeah, you're so right. That's such an interesting topic to point out of, yeah, right now the world's saying, you disagree with me? Boom, I'm just going to cut you off. I'm going to leave the room. And what you're saying is stick around, keep observing, and that we don't always have to react unless, of course, like you said, they're in these situations of of true insecurity or danger. But otherwise, if it's just discussions around uncomfortable topics, that's interesting.
And I think what we need to do, so if you're watching the game board, right, and you notice you're triggered, is we're being triggered because that's a place for us to go. I talk so much about evolution, the invitation into our own evolution, right, is where are things difficult for us? That is where somewhere along the line, we didn't get those skills. Like I grew up in a conflict-averse family. My husband is Scottish. They love robust conversations. Like it sounds like they're killing each other, but they love it. And there's no drama afterwards. My family doesn't speak for weeks afterwards, years. So, it's where do you go? Like, where's difficult? Why is this person difficult for you? But it's not for somebody, he's not for somebody else. Why is that situation difficult for you? And this is the invitation, because somewhere along the line, we didn't get those skills and now we can get them. Midlife, or like once we're in our 30s and our 40s and our 50s, is we can't afford to keep going along, missing big gaps out of our skill sets. Let's go there, right? And get those skills. Because that, especially relationships, I promise you, it's just skills. It's skills and self-management.
I love that. I also love how we keep bringing this idea of the game board back into it. I think that's such a powerful perspective to take because, like you said, you become an observer. I feel like this is a good time to ask you one of the questions that came through from the audience. The question is, how can you still be yourself, friendly, after a whole drama? Or should you rather just leave the event?
Okay, so that's an interesting one because I want to kind of unpack it in different ways. I think my first question would be to ask our caller, like, why would you be wanting to leave? Okay, so
I can assume the discomfort would be my guess. Uh-oh, we've
is
had
that particular situation of discomfort to you?
We're getting a bit choppy again with the tech here, Julia, just so you know. I don't know if you can hear me. Okay, we're back. It's funny.
Yeah.
It's just for a moment. And we're still kind of choppy though.
So the discomfort, because possibly it's not comfortable. The trick is, what is wrong with feeling uncomfortable? And this is what we do in coaching as well, is what if you were able to be anywhere and to feel uncomfortable and to process the feeling of discomfort all the way through till it leaves your body until you're back in a state of neutrality. So that would be my first one, is to ask, why would she even want to leave the event?
Mm-hmm.
And then the other question, just to discover a little bit more, is she spoke about, you said, can I be myself? Can I be myself after drama?
Yeah, be friendly. That was kind of what the be myself meant. How can I still be friendly after a whole drama?
And I guess my first question is the friendly piece. Is the friendly coming from quite a people-pleasing perspective, like trying to keep the peace? Because we might want to look at that. Or is it because the drama didn't really affect me? And maybe I'm now pledging allegiance to one side by being friendly and not standing up for the other side. So we'd want to know a little bit more about the dynamic. And what if she was to just break through the drama? This is the other option that we have in family drama, is to not slide it under the carpet or to pretend that it didn't happen, but to sort of say, well, what if we just spoke about what happened? I mean, that's really difficult for people. That's really, because not everyone in your family is getting coaching and is wanting to look at stuff. They do just want to put stuff under the table and not go there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But there is often an opening for just saying, well, what actually happened here? Like, what really happened?
I'm sure.
Because I suppose my question is, why wouldn't she want to be her friendly self?
Mm-hmm.
What's at stake?
What's at stake? That's a good question. If the person who sent in that question watches the recording, think about that. Think about what's at stake.
Can you see how tricky coaching is, right? Because it's just another question.
Yeah.
Because she knows, right? The ultimate wisdom lies in her. So I'm not the expert in her situation. I have no idea what the drama was or what actually happened. And I'm not giving it, I'm not in that position to give advice. And that's not what we do in coaching, right? Is to tease out, why is this a problem for you? Because what's in you is making you no longer neutral. What in you means that you don't have full ownership of your emotional life in that moment. And then if you do, and you are solid and you are neutral, well, then how can you help the family dynamic from that place of neutrality, and maybe shift the way the family is again.
Tell us, Julia, this is a great kind of way to segue into, you just gave us almost like a 3-step kind of, almost like a process that people would learn how to internalize and use as a skill set in a certain way to deal with these kind of conflicts. Is that the case? And then how, we've got this coaching program coming up, an 8-week coaching program to help kind of hold people's hands through the holidays and help them acquire these tools and ways of thinking. How do you guide people to begin thinking in this way and becoming that observer of the game board? Because we all just heard about this today. If it's the first time you've kind of heard of taking that observer position or some of these tools, it's really exciting to start to know these things are out there. If you've heard of them before, but maybe you're not embodying them fully in your day-to-day life and you're thinking, man, I'd really like some support to actually become that, show up in my relationships in that way. Julia, how do you help people to make that actually happen?
Yeah, and actually, Jamie, this 2-month coaching program, the 8-week coaching program, is a little different, right? Because we've got the first 4 weeks, or the beginning of it is right in the midst of it, right? The holidays.
Right.
So in the beginning, actually, is where we spend the time, and we'll always start coaching, right? Because people come to coaching and they're struggling with something. So the first thing is to really drop in and to calm your nervous system down, right? You're in stress, you're in some level of trauma. And when we're in trauma of some sort, maybe trauma is a big word, but in some stress of some thought, we're not using what's called the executive function of our brain, which is this part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex. So we are far more reactive, and things will trigger us like this, and that ability to be neutral is just virtually not possible. So the first thing we'll be doing, and we do in any coaching program, is to calm everything down, right? And to give you that sense to start building that inner resilience, and the tool, whichever one you pick, to build that resilience and to start building that into your everyday. So that's really the first step. And then again into this whole skill of being an observer. And that starts in this program with the MeSearch of while you're with family in December and early January, is just noticing. And of course, because in this particular program, we're meeting every week. There's lots of chance to be bringing your examples and getting back to a place of neutrality in the middle of it, which is very unique, right? And it's really exciting. I don't normally work over Christmas, but I did last year and I am this year because of COVID, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people just need so much more over COVID. And we're even going to have a little WhatsApp group, so people can jump into the WhatsApp group, and so it builds a nice sense of community with the small group that we'll be. And then with the MeSearch, and you then start to build a little bit of distance and start to see common patterns, because I can tell you what, we do the same thing over and over again, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I can get irritated like that with my husband, and it's the same thing every time. It's like we're like creatures, like Pavlov's dog, right? Someone rings a bell and we start salivating for food. Yeah, exactly. So we start recognizing those patterns, right? The minute we build awareness, because awareness is like this, it's like the magic formula, right? You become aware of your pattern, or you become aware of a particular thought, or aware of a way you're feeling. The minute you're aware, you can say, I want to keep that, don't want to keep that, want to shift it, want to lose it.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's where we start, like, what do we put in its place, or how do we shift it? What changes do we put in there? And then after that comes just these simple little habits of landing whatever those things are that you've decided to shift and move. You start just building like a habit stacking where you're wiring it into your being at that level, you know.
What are the
the process is pretty much like that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. What are the kind of main areas of focus in the coaching program that you're going to be walking people through, and how, I know you stay connected through WhatsApp with everyone in the group. How does that level of kind of connection and accountability and support help people as they're moving through and kind of applying some of these things as they move through the holidays?
Well, I think what's particularly useful about something like the WhatsApp group and the weekly sessions is it does keep new learnings top of mind, because like we were saying, you set an intention for your holiday period and you forget about it. Unless you are like going and sitting when you're in the bathroom and you're sitting on the loo and you're thinking about your intention, we just forget about it, right? Super quick. Right. So the thing about being in a group of people is this, there's the reminder, but there's the accountability, and there's the togetherness. Because what's so fascinating about being together as a group, this is what I love the most about group coaching, is no matter what your problem is or what your problem is, there's a common theme. So you can listen to so-and-so being coached, and it's actually easier. Sometimes you learn more from watching someone else being coached than being coached yourself. Yeah. Very different experiences, but you learn so much because you're not so attached, right? If you're watching someone else being coached, you've already got a bit of that neutrality on the game board. Whereas when you're being coached, you deep in, you're triggered, right? And so you're only seeing the very next thing in front of you.
That's a very good point. Yeah, when you're watching someone else being coached, you're not invested in the result or the outcome because it's someone else's life, but you can see the parallels, almost like storytelling. You listen to a story and you see, there's a parallel there with my life, and it's easy to identify in some ways because the resistance is gone, because it's not you're not in the story in many ways. Very cool. And what tell us, so how can people get involved in this program? What else should they know about it? Who is it for? Who's it not for?
Well, I think we'll keep it to women. So if there are any guys out there, you'll have to contact me separately. But otherwise, yeah, we're looking for people who want to thrive through the holidays and to really decide they want to evolve themselves a little bit and to see what might be different this time next year if you go through something like this. So yeah, I mean, I think what we'll do, I think we're going to start on the 8th of December. But prior to that, I would like to have a one-on-one coaching session with each person. There's going to be no more than 8 in the group. because that's a lovely number to work with, and it's really fun to be together as 8. But then I get to know your really specific topic, and we can hone it down and like really find out what's going on, and then that helps me hold the group together. And then we'll have 8 sessions and a wrap-up session after that. And I think people can book from your website, Jamie, from the Lemon Rebellion website.
We'll share that link here in the comments after the when the recording is up, so everyone can get it. One thing, Julia, that you mentioned kind of in an offline discussion that we had between the two of us that I thought was super interesting is if there are groups of siblings, if there are sisters, for instance, that both or 3 of them, depending, I don't know how big families can be, but you know, a couple sisters may want to come into this together and look at, okay, how can we together have 2 voices showing up with these similar intentions, kind of new tools to support and become an echo chamber in many ways, a positive echo chamber for each other's voices, and this new way of kind of being in relationship and in our family. What would you say to anyone that's like, hey, I've got a sister, man, it'd be amazing if both of us showed up on the same page with this kind of stuff?
I think the thing is right, everybody has to want to come to and join in the coaching.
Yeah.
Right? They have to read, and they need to know what it's about. You know, I think one of the hesitations is like, I think it's such a good idea, so I'm going to grab like the other 3 of you, and like, well, actually, I'm feeling railroaded into looking at myself and my triggers and working with my emotions and all of, you know, that. So it needs to be people who are really keen. But oh my, is it fun?
That would be fun.
It's
Or
such
friends.
fun because you've got the dynamic in the group as well, right? You've got the family dynamic will still exist. It's like reflected. So even if they're getting on well, whatever the issues are in the wider group is still going to show up in the smaller group, which is fascinating. So it's like double trouble.
That's fun. And
But yeah, so fun. Really fun, really
that would
fun.
be fun. And I remember now you're also talking about friends, friends that may obviously have different families, but maybe want to go through this together. What would be the benefit of, again, not railing somebody into doing it who doesn't want to, but if there are a couple friends that say, hey, I've got similar issues, or I would also like to work on this at the same time, what would that be like if a couple friends showed up to be in this program together?
Yeah, I mean, I think friends are quite nice because friends are often a wonderful mirror for us, and they're also good accountability partners. Sometimes even more so than siblings, right? Because there's a lot more dynamics going on with siblings. So it's a friends group is very supportive, usually really supportive. Sometimes I like to add other people into that. So there might be like 3 friends and we add some other people in just to kind of open up the dynamic, because it is also great to have people you don't know from a bar of soap. It's
Sure.
so wonderful to share your space with someone that you don't know, and freeing, right? To talk about
Yeah.
stuff. I think sometimes within a family group or friends group, there's a lot of support and a lot of accountability and holding and witnessing, which is really special. But for some people, they might actually want to open up in a quite anonymous group.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see the benefit of that too. If you really
Yeah.
feel yourself and not worried about that kind of seeping into your, circle, kind of your closer circle, so you can be very open.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, so I have coached what they call relationship systems coaching for many years. And so when you're coaching in what is already an established system, like a family group or a friend group, is there are rules of engagement, right? So for example, in an open group, there's a rule of confidentiality, right? You don't speak about what happened, you don't share people's personal stories. But within a family group or a friends group, we actually make further rules just to make sure that everyone feels really safe. Because what you don't want is, like, say you're triggered and they come back and say, you know, like while you're washing the dishes, right? Oh, well, you were triggered and you should have done it like this. No, it's not safe.
Yeah, it wouldn't be okay. Right. Yeah, very good. Good.
Yeah,
So we're
but
looking.
it's fun. It's a fun group. It's fun to do. I mean, groups, I mean, obviously if people want to do it one-on-one, there's one-on-one coaching as well. You could do that. But I encourage you into the group because it is different. And because it's relationship coaching, there's like a double layer. Very, very fun, you know. There's something magical about groups.
Yeah, I'm super excited for this program. I'm also going to be in it, which is thrilling for me as well to be able to kind of join the process. And again, for anyone that's listened today and thinks, man, there's a lot of good stuff that you took away from this conversation, insights. Maybe it stirred up something for you, and you're like, wow, I really would like to have some support moving through this holiday season so that I have some tools, someone to be there for me to help me ask the questions that are going to help me find my own answers. Julia is really a wonderful person to have guide you through this, and I'm thrilled that we can offer this program through Lemon Rebellion. I don't know, Julia, do you have any last kind of words or invitations to offer anyone who's listening and who's stayed with us this long and is curious, wants to get involved, wants some help to really make this holiday season the best one yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think just really remember this one thing is that our relationships, the way we relate to human beings, is such a vital, essential piece of our happiness. And if you get into problems with your relationships, whichever kind of ones, whether it's a husband, a child, a sister, a mother, a friend, a colleague, that's the place to go if you really want to expand your happiness in a massive, profound way. I mean, it like explodes it open, right? You get over some of the relationship issues. It's like happiness just feeds in because you're so empowered. Once you find that real power inside you, you can experience anything life throws at you. So,
Awesome.
want to blow up your happiness? We do it in relationships.
Awesome. I love that. Oh my gosh, Julia, this is going to be an amazing program. So thank you again. Thanks for hanging out and for talking about this topic. I know I learned a lot and have some things I personally want to start journaling about, thinking about more because of it. And I'm thrilled for the program. Again, it starts on December 8th. We'll leave a link here in the comments below the video, wherever you're seeing it, so that you can click through, sign up. And she's giving us a wonderful rate for this program that you'll never see ever again. It'd be this accessible economically. So definitely grab your spot. They're only
It's a COVID special.
the group itself's only going to be 8 people, and I believe we already have 2 or 3 spots taken. So definitely sign up right away. It's going to be awesome. And thanks, Julia. It was cool to hang out with you as always. And thank you.
Really nice chatting. And yeah, thanks to everyone who sent their questions in. It was really nice to use the questions, and I hope that you heard something that's going to be useful to you going forward.
I guarantee it. It was great.
And
All right. Thanks, Julia.
Okay.
And happy holidays. Yes. All right. We'll talk later. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and sign up for Make It Through the Holidays program link in the comments. See you.